Hi, everyone. My name is Patrick Proctor. I'm a professor of education at Boston College, and I'm one of the co-creators of CLAVES, which stands for Cultivating Linguistic Awareness for Voice and Equity in Schools. And if you're watching this video, that means that you are a teacher who is participating in implementing CLAVES this coming year, 2021-2022, either in Northern California or in the New York City metropolitan area, in this case specifically Yonkers. So welcome. It's great to have you. I really appreciate you being here. The purpose of this short video is to just give you an orientation to what CLAVES is and where it came from, so that during our actual orientation we can dive directly in to the curriculum itself. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time with preamble. I am going to share my screen and just talk you through a couple aspects of the CLAVES curriculum and its history. So again, welcome to CLAVES. Again, Cultivating Linguistic Awareness for Voice and Equity in Schools. You can see our website is accessible to you, clavescurriculum.net. I encourage you to go there. I'll talk more about that later. So what is CLAVES? The CLAVES curriculum is a language-based small group literacy curriculum designed for upper elementary multilingual students and their peers. This includes students who you would not consider as multilingual, but who may be English-speaking monolinguals. These are some of the books that anchor our curriculum, and I'll talk a little bit more about those in a minute. But first, a brief history of CLAVES. So CLAVES is now in its third phase. It's a long-term, since 2009, program of research that I've been involved with my colleague Rebecca Silverman, and now also with my colleague Michael Kiefer of Stanford and New York University, respectively. But in phase one, Dr. Silverman and I were working together. We were specifically interested in what predicted literacy development specifically for bilingual children, because at the time there wasn't a lot of research in this area. And so we went about a 4-year project exploring language and literacy development, and we really wanted to go beyond vocabulary. So we knew vocabulary was a big predictor of particularly of reading, but also of writing and language, component of language. We wanted to move beyond just vocabulary and think more broadly about what language is and how it might be associated with literacy development. So we started asking questions about morphology, which is the knowledge of, for the purposes of CLAVES, morphology we take to mean as knowledge of affixes, prefixes and suffixes, and how they can create word meanings. We think about semantics as related to vocabulary because semantics gets at how words are related to one another. So it's not just if you know the meaning of a word, but if you know the word dog, do you also know furry, bark, and bite as semantically related vocabulary to a core word like dog? And finally, syntax is grammar, sort of the knowledge of how language is structured to make meaning, particularly at the sentence level, thinking about how subjects, verbs, objects, tenses come together in language to make meaning. And so what we found through our study was all of these actually are associated with literacy outcomes for kids. And so we thought we decided we needed to think about developing curricula that didn't just focus on vocabulary. And so we took these results where vocabulary, morphology, semantics, and syntax were predicting literacy. And of course, this takes into account decoding. So we're interested in language. This is not a curriculum designed to develop decoding skills. We assume that that type of intervention or approach in your classrooms is already in place or has been in place. So we're focused most on the language. So we went into phase 2 and developed a 3-unit CLAVES curriculum as a field trial, as a proof of concept. And we developed this over 2 years, testing it out with bilingual programs, monolingual programs, always with bilingual students. And then in our 3rd year, so 2014 to 2016, we developed our initial CLAVES curriculum. And in 2016, 2017, we actually put it in the hands of teachers and tested it, and to see whether students who did CLAVES versus students who did not did better on measures of academic language, of reading, and in writing. And again, on the website, you can find a bunch of our articles relative to phase 1 and phase 2 if you have more interest in looking at the research background. But in phase 2, our research and findings, we were in both the Northeastern and the Mid-Atlantic United States. We asked a very basic research question: do multilingual students who receive CLAVES outperform their peers who don't on broad measures of reading, writing, and language? This was a quasi-experimental study. We randomly assigned students to CLAVES condition or a business as usual, that is, instead of CLAVES, doing what they typically do in their literacy instruction. And we worked with 239 Spanish and Portuguese English bilingual students. 119 were in the CLAVES condition and 120 were in business as usual. And we found effects of CLAVES on reading comprehension and academic language. These Hedges G are what's called effect sizes, which these are moderate effect sizes, but they are instructionally meaningful. And also on argumentative writing. So kids who were in CLAVES outperformed and showed the ability to create and construct more arguments and more counter arguments in a written essay than students who did not do CLAVES. So now we're in phase 3 of CLAVES. And we have 2 projects, one in Northern California, one in the New York metro area. Project 1 in California is asking, again, that basic research question: do multilingual students who receive CLAVES instruction outperform their peers who don't on broad measures of reading, writing, and language? The difference this time is that we're in what's called an efficacy trial, which is bigger than 239 students. There are many, many more students in this particular project. Again, we're using quasi-experimental design with the CLAVES curriculum. In New York, we're asking a different research question and using CLAVES for a different purpose. In New York, our question is, for multilingual learners, how does being in a homogeneous group with other multilingual students versus a heterogeneous group with multilingual and monolingual students affect social and literacy outcomes for multilingual students? So this is a randomized controlled design, but the condition is whether a student is in a homogeneous group or a heterogeneous group. No matter what, everybody is getting CLAVES. So we're not interested in whether CLAVES is effective. We think that it is. What we want to know is the effective grouping on literacy outcomes given a standardized curriculum, in this case CLAVES. So if you're in New York, you're part of that project. If you're in California, you're part of the first project I described. So moving into what CLAVES is, and we're going to address a lot of these questions, all of these questions in the orientation, but just to give you an overview, CLAVES curriculum is built around 4 distinct but related instructional principles. And these really are at the core of how we designed the CLAVES curriculum. One is metalinguistic awareness. The second one is dialogic teaching. The third is thinking about multimodality. And the fourth is taking a multilingual perspective. And I'm going to unpack those briefly right here. So with metalinguistic awareness, that is the ability to think about and reflect on the properties of language. So our description of this principle is that teachers and students identify, reflect on, and manipulate language through talk and play about and with language. So you're using language to think about language, making sure students are being able to manipulate it, play with it, and reflect on it. Second principle is dialogic teaching. And so that relates to metalinguistic awareness and all of our principles, in that we want kids talking. Again, this is a small group curriculum, so 4 to 5 to 6 students, where students and teachers place inquiry and discussion as central to their learning and instruction. This enables all to negotiate understanding about text and to develop arguments collaboratively. So argumentation is a big part of CLAVES, but so is talk. And so being able to interact with one another, where the teacher is more of a facilitator than a deliverer of knowledge. That's the dialogic teaching component. Multilingualism, this is a perspective we're taking on what language is for and how it's valued. So with a multilingual perspective, teachers and students use their linguistic resources and their lived experiences to make meaning, share thinking, compare languages, and offer new insights into the unit content. So we think about language, in some cases, we think about language as a noun, like I speak Spanish and I speak English. But we also think about language as a verb, to language. So when kids language, they're using all of their linguistic resources. If they're Spanish-English bilingual, in these small group discussions, they should be able to pull from all of their languages to be able to make sense and to make meaning. So we're going to talk a lot more about that in the orientation, but really thinking about not taking a monolingual perspective to the way discourse happens in small groups, but taking a multilingual perspective to that. And finally, multimodality is really thinking about how we represent what it is we want kids to learn and how we let them represent what they have learned. So teachers and students read, write, and speak across a breadth of texts that include articles, videos, picture books, games, role plays, and more. So multimodality is really thinking about trying to think beyond print text and print writing, and really moving into thinking about different ways that kids can express what they know and different ways we can express content and information to learners. Those are the principles. And so our theory of change, no matter which project you're in, is that instruction that centers these 4 principles should have a direct effect on vocabulary, morphology, syntax, and language use, right? Dialogic teaching should really affect language use. And in developing those components of language, we expect effects on broader outcomes, specifically reading comprehension, language proficiency, and writing, which are really drivers of achievement for kids in schools. So CLAVES itself, like the original one that we tested out, also has 3 units. It's been revised. The 3 units deal with humans and nature, rights and freedoms, and language, race, and identity. And you can see these are the anchor texts for those different units. So with humans and nature, we have a book, The Wolves Are Back, and a book, We Are Water Protectors. For rights and freedoms, Ivan, the Shopping Mall Gorilla, and Joelito's Big Decision. And then finally with language, race, and identity, a book, Drawn Together, and Crown, an ode to the fresh cut. So these are the core texts, but there are other texts embedded into each lesson cycle, and I'm going to describe those really quickly. So each, you can see on the left-hand side here, those 3 units are here. Each unit is comprised of 3 cycles. 2 are repeated. So cycle 1 and cycle 2 are 7-day text cycles where we focus on those anchor texts. Cycle 3 is a 3-day writing cycle, and that's the same for each unit. So if you look there, so cycle 1 and cycle 2 are the same in terms of what's done. So then if you look over at the middle table here, days 1 and day 8 is reading the text and doing vocabulary and semantics. Day 2 and day 9, day 3 and day 10, we're reading and we're thinking about vocabulary and semantics. Then in days 4, 5, and 11 and 12, we're bringing in issues of morphology and syntax in addition to additional text reading. So we're building on the vocabulary, thinking about different ways to manipulate the words through morphology, thinking about how they function in sentences to make meaning with syntax. And then finally in days 6 and 7, or day 13 and 14, day 6 is a bumper day or an extension activity day for you to catch up if you've missed any of the previous 5 days. And then finally, day 7, day 14 of cycle 1 and cycle 2 is a small group discussion. And the lessons, the cycles are designed around a single question that's meant to elicit a discussion, a big discussion at the end of the cycle. And then finally, cycle 3 is a writing cycle. The final 3 days of a unit is a 3-day sort of writer's workshop where we're working with students to conceptualize, pre-write, and write an argumentative essay linked to those small group discussions that they had on day 7 of cycle 1 and day 14 of cycle 2. So a typical lesson flow on the far right, we are reading, watching, summarizing, analyzing, and discussing text. That is at the core of CLAVES. And the second part of the core is extended language activities and discussions, focusing on things like vocabulary, semantics, morphology, syntax, and talk, negotiating meaning, negotiating understanding. So that's a brief overview of CLAVES. Overview of the logistics for the coming year for either project. We're going to have our 2-day orientation with goals and objectives for the next 2 days. Those will be shared with you, or should have been shared with you along with this video. Following that, we'll be working directly with you in monthly teacher working groups, which are small group meetings with the CLAVES PD team to go deeper into implementation of CLAVES as you get into the lessons. Then finally, between those monthly meetings, there will be ongoing coaching and fidelity observations as part of the data collection process for both of these projects. All of that, those details will be described in greater detail to you as we move forward. But this is the general framework for our work together over the next year. Getting ready for the orientation. Perhaps you're watching this after day 1 of the orientation. But first, review the agenda, take a look at it, see what we're getting into. Very important would be to read the text, "The Wolves Are Back," in your orientation packet. That's the first cycle of the first unit, so it's the first thing you'll be teaching. But we're also going to use it as a sort of to ground us in thinking about and orienting us to the CLAVES curriculum. There's a brief survey in the email that we sent out to you. If you could please take that, that would be great. And also, at your leisure, visit the CLAVES website. It's got much more information. It's got publications that we've produced over the course of the 3 phases. There's some password protected tabs on there for the lesson plan access. If you want to look at those beforehand, you're welcome to do so. The password is right here, CLAVES 2021, no caps. Feel free to peruse those and come to orientation with any questions. So I just want to thank you for being here. It has been last year the most difficult teaching year that I've ever experienced. And I think this year will be challenging as well. And we're hoping that working together, this experience with CLAVES will not be something extra to do, but something that you feel is a supportive part of your instructional day and year. So again, thank you for being with us. I'm going to stop my share. And I look forward to meeting all of you over time.